Burn your history books. The cow is a lie. The truth. Chicago wasn't murdered by an accident. It committed suicide. In 1871, this city was a greasy wooden bomb waiting to detonate. It begged for the flame, but the fire was just the opening act. You were about to watch a charred corpse mutate into a god of steel. We will witness the birth of the skyscraper rising from a pool of mud, and the construction of a white utopia designed to hide a slaughterhouse. A city so beautiful, it blinded you to the serial killer standing right next to you. This isn't a documentary, it's an autopsy. Welcome to the real Chicago. Do you honestly believe a clumsy cow kicked over a lantern and incinerated the greatest metropolis of the American West? Don't be naive. That is the single greatest piece of historical gaslighting the press has fed us for 150 years. The truth is far more brutal. Chicago didn't die by accident. It died because it was designed to burn. Look closely at Chicago in 1871. It wasn't a city. It was a giant funeral pyre waiting for a match. Everything you touched, the shingled roofs, the sidewalks, the bridges, even the roads themselves, was made of pine. 300,000 souls were living on a mountain of kindling in the middle of a historic drought. It was a death trap disguised as civilization. On the night of October 8th, hell officially opened its gates. Driven by ferocious southwest winds, the fire didn't just spread, it hunted. It evolved into a fire swirl, a sentient beast of superheated air that leaped across the river. The Chicago River, filled with grease and oil, didn't stop the flames. In some places, it actually caught fire. The heat was so intense that marble crumbled into dust, and iron flowed like candle wax. Thousands were forced into Lake Michigan, standing neck deep in the freezing water, watching as their history was devoured by the red monster. After 48 hours of fury, Chicago was gone. 17,000 buildings were erased from the earth. 100,000 people, a third of the population, were instantly homeless, wandering a blackened, smoking lunar landscape. The commercial heart of America had been surgically removed. The silence that followed was louder than the roar of the flames. But here is the twisted paradox history books miss. That ruthless fire stripped Chicago of its past, but it inadvertently performed the most violent act of urban renewal in human history. It cleared the ground for a radical experiment. From this smoking graveyard, a strange metallic skeleton was about to rise. A piece of technology the world had never seen before, that would dare to challenge God and gravity itself. What was this alien innovation, and how did it turn a disaster zone into the vertical capital of the world? If the fire was a tragedy, the rebuilding was an act of absolute insanity. Any rational city would have built low and safe, but Chicago didn't have the luxury of fear. The city was booming so violently that land prices exploded. There was nowhere to go but up. But here was the fatal flaw. Chicago is built on a swamp. It is literally floating on mud. If you tried to build tall using traditional stone masonry, the sheer weight would sink the structure before you finished the third floor. Physics had put a ceiling on human ambition. The city needed a madman. It got William LeBaron Jenney. While the rest of the world was stacking bricks like pyramids, Jenny asked a heresy. What if the walls didn't have to hold the building up? In 1884, inspired by a simple bird cage, he designed a skeleton, not of bone, but of Bessemer steel. For the home insurance building, he created a rigid metal grid that carried all the weight. The walls became just a skin, a curtain hanging on a steel body. Critics were terrified. The city inspector halted construction, convinced this metal monstrosity would topple in the wind. People walked on the other side of the street, afraid the bird cage would crush them. They were witnessing the birth of a new species of architecture, but treated it like a Frankenstein monster. But in 1885, it didn't fall. It soared 10 stories. Laughable today, but then it was the Tower of Babel. It was the first skyscraper. Jenny had unlocked the vertical dimension. Because of this single rusted box, the skylines of New York and Dubai exist today. The fire cleared the land, but steel conquered the sky. However, there was a dark side. Chicago became a gray city of soot, steel, and slaughterhouses. Powerful, but ugly. The world despised its lack of soul. To prove them wrong, city leaders embarked on an arrogant gamble to build a fantasy kingdom of blinding beauty that would make Paris look like a slum. But as they laid the foundations for this paradise, a predator was watching from the shadows. What was this blinding illusion? And what darkness was hiding inside the light?
Move 'em out! Keep 'em moving! Watch the line! Don't let 'em
The
break.
world called Chicago Porciniopolis, the city of pigs. The East Coast elites bet that a city of butchers would embarrass America. They were wrong. In 1893, Chicago didn't just host a fair, they built a hallucination. On the swampy shores of Jackson Park, 40,000 workers erected a neoclassical wonderland that made ancient Rome look modest. They called it the world's Columbian Exposition, but history remembers it as the White City. But here is the secret. It was a lie. A magnificent, beautiful lie. Those gleaming palaces weren't marble. They were stage props, plaster and jute stretched over steel skeletons. Yet, the illusion was perfect. Inside, it was pristine, featuring the answer to the Eiffel Tower. The original Ferris wheel, a mechanical giant that lifted 2,000 people into the clouds. But the true miracle happened at sunset. President Cleveland pressed a gold button, and the genius of Nikola Tesla roared to life. Hundreds of thousands of light bulbs exploded into brilliance. You have to understand, in 1893, people only knew gas lamps. When they saw the White City glowing against the dark sky, they wept. It wasn't technology, it was magic. Humanity had finally conquered the night. The Phoenix narrative was complete. In just 22 years, Chicago had gone from a burnt-out wasteland, 1871, to a vertical steel fortress, 1885, and finally to a blinding beacon, 1893. 27 million people, half the U.S. population, flocked to see it. They walked through plaster arches and saw that a city didn't have to be a dark industrial hellscape. It could be orderly. It could be beautiful. It could be electric. But, like all dreams, it had to end. Months later, another fire swept through, turning the plaster palaces back into smoke. And in the shadows, the monster H.H. Holmes had indeed claimed his victims, proving darkness always walks beside the light. But the fire couldn't burn the idea. The White City proved the city of pigs could touch the sublime. The phoenix didn't just rise, it flew. And it never looked back.